But this motion speaks to something far broader than any single case. This is about systemic reform. This is an opportunity for the Northern Territory to show leadership and to call on the federal government to do its job. Madam Speaker, I'm not here to debate whether or not there is a crisis. The crisis is undeniable and it is accelerating. A death in custody is when someone dies in jail, a youth detention centre or in police custody. And of the 99 deaths examined by the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody 30 years ago, it was found that many could have been prevented if proper duty of care had been exercised. Over 30 years later, shamefully, we remain in the same position. According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, 602 Indigenous people have died in custody since the Royal Commission concluded in 1991. And this number could be even higher due to lags in real-time reporting, as states and territories all have different procedures before they notify the Australian Institute of Criminology. There have been 12 Aboriginal deaths in custody across the country since the start of 2025 alone. Let me be clear about what these numbers represent. More than 600 families left grieving, 600 communities left without answers, 600 precious lives that could and should have been protected by the very system that was responsible for their care. Madam Speaker, we heard the Chief Minister say in this chamber about half an hour ago that when people are in the care of the state, it's our responsibility to look after them, and that is exactly what I'm talking about. The President and all 7 commissioners of the Australian Human Rights Commission are united in their demand for immediate reform. When every single member of our nation's peak human rights bodies speak with one voice, we must listen. Social Justice Commissioner Katie Kiss has said, and I quote, "Our people are dying in a system that has failed them from the beginning. The need for transformational reform is undeniable." During the Commission's recent visit to the Territory, they heard repeatedly that a law and order disaster was unfolding for Aboriginal people. And this concern has been raised consistently across the country. Without an evidence and human rights-based approach to justice and corrections, the massive overrepresentation of Aboriginal peoples in custody and dying in custody will remain a national shame. First Nations people make up just 4% of Australia's population but account for 20% of deaths in custody. If you are an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander in person, you are 5 times more likely to die than other Australians in exactly the same conditions. These are not statistics, they are people. They include John Patt, Kingsley Richard Dixon, James Lloyd Boney, David Gundy, Murungi Dumaji, Ms Du, Kumanjai Langdon, David Dungai, Rebecca Mayer, Wayne Fella Morrison, Tane Chatfield, Tanya Day, Nathan Reynolds, and here in the Northern Territory, Kumanjai Walker and Kumanjai White. They are sons, daughters, fathers, mothers and community leaders. They should still be here with us today, but instead their families live with unending pain and the knowledge that too often when their loved ones died, no independent body was there to investigate, to hold institutions accountable or to demand change. Madam Speaker, this is not a new issue. In 1991, the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody delivered 339 recommendations. 3 decades later, most of these recommendations remain unimplemented. And as I said, in those 3 decades, more than 600 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have died in custody, and that number could be even higher. Commissioner Kiss has demanded the full implementation of the recommendations of the Royal Commission and the 2023 Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability that crosses across this issue. Disability Discrimination Commissioner Rosemary Cayas has stated that each death is not just a heartbreaking loss for families and communities, but a national shame underpinned by too many ongoing systemic failures. Racial injustice and disability injustice are inextricably linked with many of these tragedies. It's time to take seriously the overrepresentation of First Nations children and adults with disabilities in the criminal justice system and urgently act to address this situation. Madam Speaker, of the 600 plus Aboriginal deaths in custody since 1991, not one person has ever been held to account. This is deeply shameful. In the Northern Territory, when the death in custody occurs, police investigate even when it potentially involves a death involving one of their own. The Chief Minister has backed this position and the Police Commissioner, the now confirmed Police Commissioner, has confirmed it. Many Territorians assume that there are checks and balances. The NT Ombudsman can investigate complaints against police but not criminal conduct. Where criminal proceedings may commence, the Ombudsman must step back. And because the Ombudsman is an office of the NT Government, it cannot be considered fully independent, and independence is critical when harm is inflicted by a government service. The coroner examines circumstances of death but does not investigate criminal responsibility. If there's suspicion of a crime, it's referred back to the police, the very institution whose conduct may be in question. So what we're left with is police investigating police. A system riddled with conflicts of interest, a system that cannot maintain accountability, cannot uphold human rights, cannot change behaviour and cannot deliver the trust and the justice that Territorians deserve. The Human Rights Commission President, 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝘼𝙈, said, "Since colonisation, Australian law has too often delivered injustice for First Nations people, and police have often been the agents of this injustice, helping to administer laws and policies like those that enable the stolen generations. Mistrust continues between First Nations communities and police. When police investigate themselves, it breeds mistrust and increases the risks of poor investigations and lack of accountability." Madam Speaker, this is not a criticism of the police, it's a criticism of systems where we get someone who is in potentially a position of having caused harm to investigate themselves. That does not engender trust in a system that we all need to trust. And while coronial inquests provide some independence, they rely on police-gathered evidence. This problem is only magnified in a jurisdiction as small and interconnected as we are here in the Northern Territory. International human rights standards are clear. Independent bodies, not police, must investigate police misconduct. Our structures fall well short. Territorians deserve better, and so do all people across Australia. Human Rights Commissioner Lorraine Finlay pointed out, we've seen avoidable tragedy after avoidable tragedy in custody. In some instances, it's made worse by the fact that serious concerns about certain facilities have been highlighted repeatedly over the years. This includes evidence given by the Commission before the United Nations Commission Against Torture. We cannot wait any longer for these issues to be addressed. By failing to urgently respond to this crisis, we are failing our communities entirely. Race Commissioner Dheran has stated clearly that it's a matter of deep distress to me that after more than 30 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to die unnecessarily in unprecedented numbers in custody. There can be no doubt that structural and systemic racism are at the heart of the problem. The National Anti-Racism Framework includes clear recommendations for reform, including in the law and justice sector, and if implemented, these can make significant progress to ending this national shame. That's why I'm asking our Parliament to join together in calling on the Commonwealth to establish a national independent body to oversee and investigate Aboriginal deaths in custody. This does not just affect the Northern Territory. This is a national crisis that affects every single state and territory. But the Northern Territory has a unique opportunity to lead. With the highest proportion of Aboriginal Australians per capita, we understand this crisis more intimately than any other jurisdiction. We have the standing, we have the experience, and we have the moral authority to demand federal action. Today, we can show the rest of Australia what leadership looks like by calling on the Commonwealth to establish an independent oversight body that families across this nation desperately need. Reform is critical to build trust, integrity and fairness for all people in our criminal justice system. We need an adequately resourced, independent oversight authority to investigate all police contact deaths. Successful models exist worldwide, including Northern Ireland's Police Ombudsman. Madam Speaker, if we are serious about justice, we must be serious about accountability. A national independent body would deliver independence, not police investigating police or prisons investigating themselves, but a body free from any perceived or actual institutional bias. Resources and power, the ability to compel evidence, to conduct thorough investigations and to enforce change. Consistency, so one standard across the nation, so families in the Northern Territory aren't treated any differently than families in New South Wales or in Queensland. Transparency, public reporting that prevents governments from burying findings or delaying action. And change, mechanisms ensuring that recommendations are implemented and monitored, not just filed away. Madam Speaker, this is not about blame, it's about truth, justice and the right of every family to know their loved one's life mattered enough for their death to be properly investigated, learned from and used to prevent further deaths. Why is it that deaths in custody require additional attention and scrutiny? When we take a person into custody, we are exercising all the power and might of the state against individuals. We train and arm police and corrections officers and give them additional legal and authority and protections to use force against our own people. We use the power of the state to forcibly control and take control of people almost always against their will. And taking a person into custody is the greatest example of using this state power to deprive a person of their liberty and autonomy, two of our most treasured values. And when we, as the state, use this power to forcibly take a person into state control, we must be held to the highest standards of how we treat those people. When we take control of a person, we now bear full responsibility to protect that person. When we take a person into custody, we are now responsible for their health, their physical safety and their mental safety, and in more than 600 cases, their lives. We must not wield the power of the state to take control of people and then ignore the responsibility that comes with that power. Madam Speaker, the best way to make sure that we're consistently meeting the required standards, to make sure that people are not unnecessarily dying while under our control, is to create strong and trusted accountability systems. We know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are dramatically overrepresented in our prisons, in our watch houses and in deaths in custody. This is not by chance. This is the result of systemic inequality and intergenerational trauma. And we know that legislation plays a role in driving up incarceration rates, including here in the Northern Territory, with soaring imprisonment rates and Aboriginal people dramatically overrepresented. Australia's first formal truth-telling body, the Europe Justice Commission, in its report this year, said the overrepresentation of First Peoples in these systems is not about criminality, but systemic bias, including institutional racism and discriminatory policing. And when we have dramatic overrepresentation here in the NT, with 88% of adults and 95% of children who are locked up are Aboriginal, we dramatically increase the risk of harm and even death. And when the lives are lost in the care of the state, our duty of care is at its highest. To fail at that moment and to deny independent scrutiny is to deny the humanity of those lives. Madam Speaker, Australian governments must embrace fair, humane and effective criminal justice laws and policies to end the national disgrace of First Nations deaths in custody. We need human rights acts in all states and territories and nationally to protect the rights of all people, including First Nations peoples. There's an urgent need to invest in prevention to stop people from entering the justice system in the first place. Our governments need to respond genuinely to the commitments that they have undertaken to meet the Closing the Gap targets. Commissioner Chris and President de Cresta are calling for independent oversight authorities to be established in all jurisdictions to end the practice of police investigating police in police custody. Over several decades, the Commission has advocated for the establishment of independent entities to investigate police conduct across all jurisdictions. The Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody clearly established that investigations into police conduct must be independent of police, with transparency throughout and formal complainant support, including legal assistance. Madam Speaker, we cannot keep repeating this cycle. Another death, another grieving family, another coronial report gathering dust. Without independent oversight, nothing has changed, nothing will change, and when nothing changes, more lives will be lost. This is not just an issue for Aboriginal people. It's an issue of justice, democracy and human rights. It speaks to who we are as a nation and what future we want to build. The families of those who have died in custody have been calling for this reform for years. Aboriginal legal services, human rights experts, the 4 Northern Territory land councils have all added their voices. The entire Australian human rights community stands united in this call. And together, today, this Parliament has a chance to join them and to say clearly that the Northern Territory supports accountability, supports transparency and supports justice for all people. Social Justice Commissioner Katie Kiss has said it plainly. Enough is enough. This is a chance for the Northern Territory to lead on an issue which affects people across the whole of Australia. Madam Speaker, this motion is nothing radical. It's something that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have been calling on for decades. It's something that is our government's responsibility to call on the Commonwealth to advocate for change and to call on the Commonwealth to advocate for them to do their job to keep all of our communities safe. Madam Speaker, I commend the motion to the Assembly.
Member for Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to make my contribution in relation to this. But, Madam Speaker, before I start, I just want to make it very clear that I am completely disgusted and offended by the words Member John just spoke about police not being trustworthy. My father was a police officer. How dare you say he's not trustworthy? Madam Speaker, Member for Berkeley is a police officer. I know he's offended by your words. Are you going to apologise to him? Are you saying he's not trustworthy? How embarrassing.
Member for
disgusting.
Nelson, direct your comments through me, please.
Sorry, Madam Speaker.
I appreciate your
I'm just getting very fired up that how dare she call the police untrustworthy. The police are the first person to run into danger. They're the first person Territorians call when there's a problem. I bet you the member for Johnson's called the police. I bet you one of her friends has called the police, and yet she stands here and says they're not trustworthy. And she used the words, police agents of injustice. The police are agents of injustice. That's embarrassing, Madam Speaker. The police do a great job, and I want to say, as I calm down a little bit, that I support the police completely, 100%. I know people on this side of Parliament support the police 100%. They do a great job. They have had their hands tied by the former Labor government. They haven't been able to do their job properly. And now, Madam Speaker, we've unshackled the police. They're out there doing their job and they're keeping the community safe. Keeping the community safe, Madam Speaker, and that is what Territorians want. Madam Speaker, I know that many people on this side, and I am sure, as I'm standing here, that people have been into the people on the other side's office and say, the community is unsafe. We are out of control. And Madam Speaker, yet the member for Johnson is here calling the police untrustworthy. And Madam Speaker, I hope the police listen to that, and I hope that they hear what she said, and I hope, Madam Speaker, that she sits up there and reads about herself and looks herself in the mirror and goes, gee, I should be embarrassed, because she should be, Madam Speaker. Those words are disgusting, and I'm personally offended by them. Madam Speaker, and again, I've just spoken to the member for Berkeley. He is personally offended by them. How dare someone call someone in this chamber untrustworthy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we do not support the proposal into Commonwealth Oversight for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders for police and prison custody. Madam Speaker, every death in custody is a tragedy. And I wish to begin by expressing this government's sincere condolences to the family and the communities of loved ones lost. The loss of life while in care of the state warrant thorough review and continuing reform, Madam Speaker, and we believe that the current framework, built on territory accountability, rigorous oversight, is both appropriate and effective. Madam Speaker, in the Northern Territory, every death in custody is subject to a coronial investigation, accompanied by independent police inquiry, Madam Speaker. So there's 2 oversight bodies that look at these deaths in custody. Madam Speaker, these processes aren't just token processes just to see what happens, Madam Speaker. The police do a great job. They are thorough, They investigate, no matter who it is, Madam Speaker, because they're there to look after Territorians. They swear an oath, Madam Speaker, to serve and protect, and that's what they do, Madam Speaker. We've had reviews, we've talked about health, we've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about training that's happened as a result of these reviews. So when the member for Johnson says nothing's happened, enough's enough, things are happening, Madam Speaker. Things do happen. Madam Speaker, there have been many improvements over the correction system, stemming from these coronial recommendations, demonstrating that there is a local oversight and the chain is working here. Madam Speaker, recent data says our prison population in the Territory is about 2,850 individuals, with approximately 80% of those identify as Indigenous. Madam Speaker, it's important to acknowledge that most Aboriginal deaths in custody in the Northern Territory are due to medical conditions, not suicide or violence. Medical conditions, Madam Speaker, and I'm not sure where the member for Johnson got her numbers from. Maybe she's plucked them out of the air, but Madam Speaker, over the last 5 years there's been 38 deaths in custody, with 26 of those in the Northern Territory being Indigenous and 12 non-Indigenous. Madam Speaker, while Indigenous people make up the most of our population, non-Indigenous prisoners experience a higher likelihood of death in custody overall, with their rate being 1.8 times higher than Indigenous people. So, Madam Speaker, perhaps this should say about, if she's really honest with herself, about deaths in custody, full stop. Why are we limiting it to one person, one group of people? Why aren't we limiting it to all Territorians? Does the member for Johnson think that that Territorians are unequal, or there's a divide? Do you think that, Madam Speaker? Well, no, there's not. If you're a Territorian, you're a Territorian. If you're an Australian, you're an Australian. I'm not sure why the member for Johnson is trying to divide the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, out of those deaths I spoke about, 25 were due to natural causes. 5 were due to suicide, 2 Indigenous and 3 non-Indigenous. And those natural causes, Madam Speaker, are preceded by long, extended periods of diagnosed and managed illnesses under the care of the corrections. These deaths are not sudden deaths or unexplained deaths. They are a result, Madam Speaker, of long-standing health conditions, Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, I have to say from my experience, people go into the correction system and actually come out more healthier people. They actually get the medication, they get access to health care, they get access to rehabilitation programs, they get access to counsellors, which is something that they choose not to when they're out in the community. For some reason, people choose not to go and get medical help, madam. That wouldn't be me, but some people choose not to do that, and then they don't get. So when they do get into custody, they've got these very serious health issues, and their treatment needs to be done. But unfortunately, sometimes the conditions are so far advanced that nothing can be done. As I'm saying, Madam Speaker, once someone is in custody, our correctional health teams provide constant care that is not accessed for some reason, for their own choice, out in the community, and no matter where they live. We've got the member for Berkeley, the Health Minister, does a great job of providing healthcare right across the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, deaths in custody, suicides are tragic, and the families out there are hurting. But, Madam Speaker, so do the correctional staff, Madam Speaker. These people who are, the member for Johnson just refers to, aren't just numbers to those correctional officers. They're people they know, people they can talk to. Sometimes they come in out of custody, they know who they are. I'm not going to say they're friends, but they're acquaintances, they talk, they know their background, and yet these people pass away, Madam Speaker. So I know that the statistics are bad, but compared to other jurisdictions, our system is performing better than most in the Northern Territory. I know the Territory has the highest imprisonment rate in the country, and still our deaths in custody remain lower than those in other states and territories. Madam Speaker, one thing I think can be overlooked sometimes is the strength of our correction system and the high standard of medical care provided to those prisoners. So, Madam Speaker, I've been into the prison, I've walked through the health medical centre. I understand, I see how they work, I speak to the nurses who work there, I speak to some of the inmates. They get their treatment, they get their medication, and I'm sure Member Jew, who's spent 18 years, knows exactly what I'm talking about. If anyone in this chamber would be an expert in the prison, would be my friend. Madam Speaker, Tragically, when people get released, they disengage from medical care. And that's another reoccurring challenge. They come into the custody, they get provided health care, they get their treatment, they take the medication, and again, they get released, and for some reason, they choose not to do that. Madam Speaker, so I'm going to go back to the emotional toll on the corrections staff and the health staff that deal with these people. Having anyone die in your care would be devastating. And I'm sure they're deeply affected by those deaths. So, Madam Speaker, the corrections officers aren't just faceless agents of a system. They're professionals committed to safety, dignity and rehabilitation, and they do a great job. And I give them my 100% support, Madam Speaker. And they work in a very challenging environment, and we're here to support them. Madam Speaker, I just want to close by saying we are doing the work. We're doing it with resolve. We're trying to make sure that prisoners break the cycle of reoffending, go out in the community, better people, healthier people, and the administration of that justice is a core responsibility of this government, and we take it seriously. And we do listen to recommendations of these oversight bodies. They're already there. Madam Speaker, if we're going to spend money, we don't have a limited amount of money, and I know the member for Catherine spoke about that, but we were left a horrific debt by the previous Labor government. So, Madam Speaker, if you're going to create a body to oversight this, what do you have to cut, Madam Speaker? Are you going to cut the health system? Are you going to cut the education system? Are you going to cut the police system? You have to balance things up here, Madam Speaker. So what are we talking about? What are we going to cut to have this body that has already got two other bodies? We've got the coronials and the police. So a third oversight body when we have to cut maybe teachers or health staff or police, or again give the police an extra patrol car to go out on the road. Madam Speaker, it is a balance. It's a very difficult balance to work, but the Northern Territory government, this side of government, is about making decisions for the best interests of Territorians, no matter where you live. So, Madam Speaker, we won't be supporting this motion.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I stand today and thank the member for Johnson for bringing on this important motion for the Commonwealth Oversight into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in police and prison custody, that the Assembly call on the Commonwealth Government to urgently establish a national independent body with the resources and power to enforce minimum standards and to investigate, report, monitor and enforce change in relation to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in police and prison custody in Australia. Madam Speaker, I will just pick up on the behaviour from the Deputy Chief Minister before. I find it quite concerning that here...
Just pause, please, Member for Daly. We're not going to get into this. If people start interjecting, I will remove them from the chamber. There's been a lot of heat in the discussion this afternoon, and I think it's time to tone it down and just be respectful. Member for Daly, you've got the call and you will be heard in complete silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I was saying, Madam Speaker, I find it completely concerning that the Deputy Chief Minister has come in here and shown his unhinged behaviour towards a Member of Parliament in this chamber. The Deputy Chief Minister comes in here and tries to intimidate, yells, screams and points at the member for Johnson.
Just pause for a minute. In this chamber, you can yell. You can yell as loud as you want, provided it is directed through the chair and it is within the context of the debate. I'll allow you to continue, but I will exclude the next person who interrupts, because quite frankly, I've had enough of this bad behaviour today.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I was saying, they don't like to hear the truth, because we've just seen the Deputy Chief Minister come in here and lean over his desk to try and intimidate, scream and yell and point at the member for Johnson and trying to reflect on her speech, when he could have just put that in his speech in a respectful way, instead of trying to intimidate people in this place. We are supposed to be members of Parliament and leaders in the Northern Territory, and the behaviour we have just seen from the Deputy Chief Minister, I think, is quite concerning and speaks of bigger problems in this place and bigger problems of himself. It is not okay to come in here and intimidate people, and we need to ensure that this is a safe space for everyone to come and speak. And again, they're interjecting because they don't like to hear the truth.
Member for Daly, take a seat. Member for Barclay, what is your point of order?
Standing Order 35, we're here in general business debating the motion by the member for Johnson. All the member for Daly wants to do is talk about the Deputy Chief Minister. Can he get back on track and talk about the motion?
Look, can I just respond to the point of order? I don't think there is a point of order, but I take the general point that we need to just focus on the topic and instead of each other. Continue.
Thank you. And as I was saying, I was listening to the member for Johnson's speech, and she did not at all say she does not trust the police. So the Deputy Chief Minister shouldn't come in here and make those accusations, and I suggest he goes back on Hansard and looks at her speech. We are talking about the Commonwealth Oversight into Aboriginal and Torres Strait.
Take your seat, please, Member for Daly. What is your point of order, Member for Barclay?
Standing Order 35, as I said, we're here to debate the motion that put forward by the member for Johnston. If the member wants to defend the member for Johnson about other issues not relevant, it's not relevant to
Member
the debate.
for Barclay, there is no point of order here. He's just started his speech. He's a few minutes in. He's got the call. Please continue.
Thank you. And as I was saying, the member for Barclay also is backing in his Deputy Chief Minister for the behaviour that was just displayed before. Because as I was saying, the member for Johnson did not say that she does not trust the police, and Hansard will reveal that. Now, Madam Speaker, since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, there have been 609 Indigenous deaths. This year alone, there have been 75 deaths in custody nationally, including 2 in the NT within the space of just 1. Madam Speaker, 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙋𝙎, a 24-year-old Warlpiri man with a disability, died in Alice Springs on the 27th of May 2025 after being restrained by police on the floor of a Coles supermarket. Every family, every Territorian should expect that their child, parent, cousin or sibling will be safe if they have contact with the police or with the justice system. To be safe no matter what the involvement with the justice system looks like. Our community needs to be able to trust that the government takes safety seriously, especially safety within systems that are meant to protect us and keep us safe, regardless of your background. We need to continuously ask ourselves how we can make our systems safer, how our responses are safer. Just like if there was a death in a workplace or a school or a sports centre. We would expect those places to take a step back, to talk to the community, to the families, and look for better ways for working together. It is clear this government is not willing to listen. Madam Speaker, 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙋𝙎's death is a call to action. It is clear the CLP do not have a plan to take action and prevent future deaths in custody. They are not willing to rebuild the trust between Aboriginal communities and take the necessary steps that will protect some of the most vulnerable in our community. When the Royal Commission into Deaths of Aboriginal People in Custody was announced, its purpose was to address the community's concerns that deaths of Aboriginal people in custody were too common and too poorly explained. Over 35 years later, and these questions are still being raised today, questions that the CLP are not willing to answer. The CLP have been in government for a year now, and what measures have we seen that demonstrate they are serious about keeping Territorians from being left in the dark? They passed legislation on urgency with no consultation with the community or services and stakeholders who are best placed to provide advice. They shut out frontline services who have the evidence of what works and what is ineffective. Territorians have had enough of secrecy from the CLP. They have taken away resourcing from programs that work, from systematic reforms of the NT Police, from programs that would reduce over-incarceration of Aboriginal Territorians and build a pathway towards positive relationships between the community and the justice system. Territory Labor supports the establishment of a national independent oversight body to investigate deaths in custody. It was the former Labor government that introduced legislation for the optional protocol of the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, Degrading Treatment or Punishment, or also known as 𝙏𝙀𝙈𝙀𝙎. The 𝙏𝙀𝙈 legislation and establishment of the National Preventative Mechanisms was a Territory Labor initiative which took steps to improve our justice system. It was the previous Labor government that consulted on how 𝙏𝙀𝙈 would work, how it would lead to a better independent framework against which to hold the justice system to account. It was my colleague, the former Attorney General, Chancey Paik, who facilitated access for visitors from the UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture to our youth justice facility. It is a commitment of 𝙏𝙀𝙈 and supporting the critical work of NPMs that would lead to progressing minimum standards, monitoring and reporting on the care and protection of Territorians who are held in places like detention centres, correction facilities and police watch houses. It was a Labor initiative that, like this, which contributed to creating an effective, strong and safe justice system, a system that welcomes oversight, that encourages open and constructive dialogue, and a system that improves based on the lived experiences of Territorians, independent advice and the evidence of what we know works and where we can do better. This is an opportunity to do better, to better protect the lives of every person who is involved or will be involved with our justice system. We know our police are incredibly committed to community safety, and this is no way a criticism of the vital work they do. It is about supporting their efforts. We would expect the establishment of a national oversight body to be built on a foundation of evidence, community input and recommendations from past coronials, royal commissions and inquiries as to how best to implement such a mechanism and how best to serve the community. For the NT government to work with the oversight body to rebuild trust, to improve our law enforcement practices so they create safe conditions, not only for police officers, but for the people and communities that they serve. The specific functions and powers of the proposed national body would need to be carefully worked through, in particular powers to compel and enforce changes and how that will work practically. While we support independent investigation, reporting and monitoring, the powers must be workable and clearly defined. Independent investigations provide the essential element of impartiality that is missing when police investigate police. Trust in our justice system is deeply limited in many Aboriginal communities. It has been eroded by generations of trauma, colonisation, the stolen generations, and repeated injustice before the law. That mistrust will not heal on its own. It requires accountability, cultural sensitivity, and a willingness to listen to those with lived experience. Madam Speaker, the CLP have been in office for just over a year and have already broken promises to Aboriginal communities. Trust in this government is at an all-time low. NT Police have commenced and are undertaking important reform work to rebuild trust and rebuild relationships with Aboriginal and remote communities. They are putting in considerable effort to improve their ways of working and take the next steps for cultural reform. The NT Police Force acknowledge they are in an important period of transition and that it is a huge body of work, that it is a huge body of ongoing work. They are taking action. The CLP refuse to acknowledge this incredible important work. They have no regard for the efforts of the NT Police to undertake this work, to take the restoration of trust and relationships with Aboriginal and remote communities seriously. The CLP ultimately do not respect the past and ongoing efforts of the NT Police in the implementation of recommendations from the coronial. The coronial inquest cannot, on their own, drive systematic reform or repair the mistrust between Aboriginal communities and the justice system at the pace and depth that is needed. Too many recommendations from royal commissions and coronials remain unactioned. The CLP claim they are committed to making the Territory a safer place. We ask the CLP to listen to the community, listen to Central Australia, listen to 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝘼𝙈. They are calling for fairer justice. This is not too much to ask. This is the bare minimum. A national oversight body would not replace but complement existing mechanisms. Review of evidence, investigation, reporting and monitoring would be enhanced through reliable, impartial, transparent and accountable oversight. Territory Labor are committed to better ways to make the Territory safer. Prevention is the key, making the Territory safer for all Territorians. What does that look like? This means investing in long-term solutions that change our systems and services for the better. Deaths in custody are preventable. The Central Land Council have urged the government for measures that will ensure there established an independent police conduct commission. And they said, NT was the only state or territory that does not have an independent body to investigate police conduct. As a result, the NT has failed to overhaul the culture of its police force. No independent oversight makes the dissolution and sorrow gripping his community so much harder to bear. NAJA, who work directly with some of our community's most vulnerable people, believe there is a need for an independent oversight body to deliver true accountability and transparency in cases of police misconduct towards Aboriginal people and to drive structural change to the police forces. The acting CEO said, let's not wait for another inquiry, for another 12 months. We know that a person losing their life over a shoplifting incident is not acceptable. The CLP don't want to know how to build back trust in the justice system for Territorians because they know their laws and policies are not making communities safer. They know they're doing everyday Territorians a disservice by preventing reforms which will make the NT public service gold standard. The CLP has shown time and time again that they have no interest in sitting down with the community, in sitting down with Aboriginal remote communities to listen, to develop place-based programs, community-led program, rehabilitation and diversion services that are meaningful and specific. If government responses are failing to serve some of our community's most disadvantaged, how can the rest of the NT trust these systems won't fail them as well? We need to shift the focus from incarceration to strategic initiatives like crime prevention plans, appropriate oversights of the use of restraints, stopping unsafe restraint practices, reduce overcrowding in prisons, which prevents rehabilitation of offenders, addresses unmet mental health and disability needs, funding frontline specialist services, delivering accessible and engaging education, holding people to account while providing effective rehabilitation, diversion and community-based responses. The President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, 𝙏𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬, released in his statement, what's clear is that a system in which police investigate police deaths in custody is fundamentally flawed. Community trust is critical for effective policing. Communities experience disadvantage, need to be best of policing, and yet often receive the worst. It is why the response to these and other deaths in custody is critical. Let's take a look at the context in the NT. We have high rates of incarceration. Removing the option for prisons to be a last resort for children and young people, reintroduction of spit hoods, increased rates of people coming into contact with the justice system. These factors make it even more important to lay the foundation for a future and a government which prioritises prevention and takes appropriate action to put offenders on a better path, as well as the broader community. A national oversight body would increase consistency and provide uniform standards across jurisdictions. Let's ensure the NT is on par with, if not better, than our state and territory counterparts. Territorians do not deserve investigations that unfortunately can potentially result in re-traumatisation. Echoing recommendation 27 from the landmark �㗌𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 for the Justice Report, a national oversight body could take responsibility for independent police oversight to investigate and determine all complaints about police investigation and report on all police contact deaths and serious incidents. And on its own motion, monitor, audit, systematically review and report on the exercise of police powers and make those reports public. Madam Speaker, there are so many good police officers in the Territory who are doing wonderful things to keep our community safe, and they are an essential part of the Territory. Extra scrutiny and evaluation of public services will only increase the public's trust in the systems and make those services safer and Aboriginal people for our community and for everybody. Madam Speaker, in closing, I'd just like to thank again the member for Johnson for bringing this important motion before the House. We know this is a national issue, but it's also a Territory issue that we've continued to see here for quite some time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Mulka. Oh, sorry. Member for Namatjira.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wasn't going to speak this afternoon, but after some of the stuff I've heard here in the chamber, I feel compelled to speak. Because it seems there's a lot of experts on corrections and deaths in custody in this chamber. But I sort of wonder how many people have actually worked in that system and been involved in deaths in custody. And sadly, I can stand here and say that unfortunately I have been. Also, Madam Speaker, I will not stand here and be lectured by the member for Daly on harassment and intimidation, because those of us who were here in the last Assembly are well aware of the things that took place one evening outside this Parliament House, and for him to come in here and claim that is absolutely hypocritical. But I'll talk about a couple of things here particularly.
Order. No interjections, please.
There was a comment that the police were untrustworthy, and the leader, the deputy leader, got pretty upset about that. And I'll tell you what, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd be pretty well upset too, because the deputy leader, his father was a police officer, and to come into this chamber and say that police are untrustworthy is, I suppose, absolutely abhorrent. And I also feel for the member for Berkeley, being told that he was untrustworthy because he was also a police officer. It's absolutely disgusting. Our police officers are pillars of our community. They're the people who keep us safe. And of course, there's also an adage for prison officers as well, is they face what you fear. And as the deputy leader specifically stated, our police officers run into danger when everyone else is running away from it. So to call them untrustworthy is completely and utterly disgusting. But also, I just need to touch on a couple of things, because I was a little bit worried about the commentary from the member for Daly, because he was making commentary about a death in Alice Springs, and I'm not going to talk about it because I want to make sure that I don't prejudice that ongoing investigation, because he spoke about the police involvement in such a way that could be seen to be prejudicing that ongoing investigation in Alice Springs. And that is very, very concerning, Mr Deputy Speaker, when people here in this parliament are making comment about actual ongoing investigations and, of course, speaking ill of people involved in those investigations does have the opportunity to prejudice that ongoing investigation. I think the member for Daly needs to take that very much into consideration around his comments. But I'll talk about the Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, and I'll talk about specifically corrections. And we know that the 87 Royal Commission was absolutely and desperately needed, and I'll back that in. And of those 339 recommendations provided by that Royal Commission, the Territory accepted all of them bar two. There was two that we couldn't accept, and it was around housing prisoners in places closest to where they live, because with the geographical locations of our prisons, it's just something that couldn't be done. So there was only those two recommendations that we didn't support, and I had to study that Royal Commission when I became a prison officer. I spent quite a bit of time in it, so I think there was recommendation 57 and 58 were the two that weren't supported. But everyone's speaking ill of police and of corrections when we're talking about deaths in custody. And I want to flip that on its head, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I've been involved in a number of deaths in custody, as I've said. And I've been up in front of the coroner on a number of occasions because of those deaths in custody. And I'm proud to be able to stand here today, Mr Deputy Speaker, and say that nearly every time that I've been up in front of the coroner has had positive things to say about police and about correctional services in the way that they worked with the individual to support them prior to their death. I'm touching wood when I say this, and my correctional colleagues will probably not be happy with me for saying it. There has never been a successful suicide in the Alice Springs Correctional Centre, the site that sits out on Owen Springs. And there's a reason for this, Mr Deputy Speaker, is because of the way that the staff work and take into consideration elements from that Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, because it drives the way that people are trained and how they work with individuals. So in my years in corrections, I work with a number of people who were terminally ill, and that is generally in probably 95 to 98% of the instances in deaths in custody within the correctional services area is natural causes from chronic disease or terminal illness. And I watched the staff and how they deal with the people who are sick and ill, and how then they work with the families to do everything they can to make sure that there is dignity for the individual, access to family, and of course understanding the cultural requirements of those people. And that's what's forgotten, and what is not being talked about here in this chamber today is the work that correctional staff and police do in these circumstances, because it's not just corrections, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've been in the coroner's court when dealing with deaths in custody, and I've seen the coroner also praise and congratulate the police for the work that they did with a person leading up to their death when it was considered a death in custody. And that is forgotten, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I need to make that very, very clear so everybody actually understands that, because corrections and police go above and beyond working with people when they know that they are chronically ill or terminally ill, to make sure that everything is done to make the last days, weeks or months of their life as comfortable as possible, and providing that access to family and country wherever possible. And that is firmly embedded now in corrections, I can tell you, and I believe the police force also utilise some of those ideas that corrections have been doing. So I have 100% support for our police, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've worked closely with police now for over 25 years. And the work that they do and the way that they go about their work is absolutely exemplary. And to say that they are untrustworthy is absolutely abhorrent. The member for Daly spoke, and I just want to touch on this, but I don't want to labour on the point, but he spoke about rehab and support for correctional services. And we're turning that around as a CLP government, because I can tell you now, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I was in corrections when it happened, Labor was sending corrections backwards. And the rehab and support just wasn't there. And it's one of the reasons I ended up in this chamber. I watched the work that we did for a number of years to turn corrections around, to start driving the employment, education, vocational educational and programming opportunities for people to make them better when they got out. And Labor got into power in the end of late 2016. It was like somebody threw the anchor out on the ship. It all come to a grinding halt. And that changed my focus. All the work that I've been doing for years and years and years in corrections was effectively stopped. All that positive work, Labor went to just a rack 'em and stack 'em model, and they weren't interested in doing anything else. And that was one of the drivers for me to be here in this chamber today, because I could see what they were doing and I didn't agree with it, and I wanted to get out and be able to do something and make a difference to what was happening in correctional services. I'm proud to be able to stand here today and say that we, as a Whanokiraro CLP government, are making those changes. And also, the member for Daly was talking about some of the changes that have taken place in youth justice and, of course, in corrections around staff and the ability for staff to protect themselves. And I will not make an apology for that. I don't think anyone in this chamber should make an apology for that, Mr Deputy Speaker, because we put the safety of staff at the forefront. The staff are there to look after people in their care, whether that's corrections, police, youth justice. But previously, under the last government, staff became punching bags. The laws were changed, the acts were changed, and legislation were changed in such a way that disempowered the staff, and they effectively become punching bags. And I'm proud to be able to stand here today and say that those laws were changed to protect those staff, to give them the protection so they can go to work safely and come home safely, because everyone seems to forget about that. Those staff need to go to work safe and come home to their families safe. But I just wanted to put on a record, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the positive work done by police and corrections in working with people who are ill, who are suffering chronic illness or chronic disease, or dealing with deaths in custody, because everyone's very, very quick to criticise. Nobody sees the other side. And I'm glad to be able to stand here today and be able to provide some of that commentary from the other side, because it is very, very quickly forgotten about. Everyone is very, very quick to demonise everybody else, and that needs to stop. And as the Deputy Leader said, we need to consider the issues for the people who are dealing with those things when we see a death in custody, when people have to respond and deal with those things. It's very, very traumatic, and it takes a huge toll on that person, then a huge toll on their family and the larger workforce. And again, people are very, very quick to forget about that, and they shouldn't. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Malka.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Johnston for bringing this motion to the chamber today. I strongly support this motion, and I have spoken many times about deaths in custody in the chamber. I would like to add this into spare parts. It's about working with police and elders of our communities. I am standing to work on and support a system where police can work with in the system they know best. They know best. And I want to say that here, it's nothing to do with it. I'm talking about whether it's today's CLP government or Labor past for many years that have been going are rotating around to be controlling the police, what they need to do. But it's also that we want to see a fair justice going on in this. I am standing from the other side of the in this office, from outside my office. We are policing and stuff. And this is where I really strongly support that we should consider this and work on this together. So that a fair outcome becomes in this system. Last week I was at the police Memorial Day in Go during their memorial. I stood there with them and I shook their hands and I supported them. And I said, you and we want to stand with you and support you, so that hopefully the governments of the time will need to stand with us and work together. So just wanted to add that bit of story. The Royal Commission into deaths in custody happened in 1991, over 3 decades ago, but we haven't seen any real improvement or systemic change since this time. We haven't seen justice and people are still dying. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I think about the loss of my brother on the beach, or the loss of 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 and 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙀 for the 𝙐𝙈𝙆 community, or the loss for every family and community when we have a loved one died in custody. We do not feel there has been a justice for our loved ones. For the police to investigate themselves, don't give people confidence in at that time. There is a transparency, and it puts unreasonable hardship on the police members to investigate themselves. Zechariah Ralph was charged with murder there, where a great upset within the police community had about the changes laid on and the investigation process. Sorry. What was needed was an independent body that could investigate, sitting separately from the police and separate from the government. There should be no perceived bias and no perceived intent to protect one group or another. When there is no clear and transparent process, it causes great division across our communities. Instead, there should be an independent investigation. Investigations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have spoken before in the chamber about my wawa on the Elcho Island and 𝙐𝙎𝙆𝙀𝙎𝙏 on the 𝙐𝙎𝙆𝙈𝙀𝙎. These deaths all happen outside of a police station or a prison cell. Wawa was shot on his country and on a beach on 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝘼𝙈𝙋𝙎, on Elko Island. 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝘎 was shot in the family home. 𝙏𝙎𝙈 White died in a supermarket. They died and places. They died in places where they should have been safe. For their deaths showed us that no one is safe. For a few years ago, I was sleeping in a house when police stormed in during the night looking for someone. In the instance, the police apologized and left. But we know there is a potential for something to go wrong. We know there is a systemic racism and personal racism. We know there is. We know when we know this from experience, and we know this because the recent colonial findings made it very clear. And so we worry for our families. We worry that we have not been not seen justice or systemic change that makes people safe when they are in police custody. I've also spoken about Commonwealth Langdon previously. He died in the watch house after being arrested for drinking in a public place, even though he was causing no harm or disturbance to anyone else. In his case, the former coroner, Mr. Greg Kavanagh, said, Commonwealth Langdon, a sick middle-aged Aboriginal man, was treated like a criminal and incarcerated like a criminal. He died in the hands of police cell. Well, he died in the police cell, which was built to house criminals. He died in his sleep with strangers in this coal and concrete cell. He died of natural causes, but he was entitled to die in peace. In the comfort of family and friends. In my view, he was entitled to die as a free man. Mr. Deputy Speaker, right now, this government is locking up in unsafe environments. Sometimes people are not getting their medication or access to regular health workers. There is a duty of care for these prisoners that is not being met. The Attorney General has said that she does not care about the trauma that watch hours cause people. when I visited Palmerston Watchhouse, the prisoners looked at me with hope, they thinking that I was there to help. To help them, and I wanted to help them, but there was nothing I could do. And I felt angry and upset that there was nothing I could do other than appeal to this government to fix the problems they are creating. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we have heard of, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have heard of assaults and women being kept in the middle of the men's prison in Alice Springs. People being held in watchhouses cells with no time outside in the fresh air, and lights staying on all day and nights, all day and night rather, for more than five weeks at a time. Lawyers have begged judges for the clients to be able to appear in court in person so they can have some time outside from the cell. I'm not sure if the CLP members can understand that this is a breach of human rights. The people in our watchhouses and jails are still people and preserve a human approach, deserve a human approach. And a human approach will help people to rehabilitate. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government rather, can't understand this issue very well, because it is Aboriginal people that are filling the watchhouses and the prisons. We know that non-Indigenous people tend to get bail. The case of Jack Dornby is a clear example that people who are not Indigenous do not spend weeks and months in watchhouses and jails. They get bail, and even when they are convicted of a crime, they are sent home. It is Aboriginal people that are suffering in this current system, and the government are not Aboriginal people. It is not their families or their clans who are suffering under this system. So they don't understand the damage that is being caused. But I am here. I stand here today, and I am trying to tell you that the government of the day been talking for the last third terms of two governments I've been with. Damage to my people is causing damage for all the the people who are stuck in the system that is broken. Mr. Deputy Speaker, despite the Royal Commission, despite the numerous coronials, we have not seen a significant system change. We need to see through investigations and that compel governments to bring changes that keep everyone safe. It is clear for me that this government does not want to keep everyone safe. The Attorney General has said it quite clear, and so it is critical that we must have a national body that investigates the reports, monitors and encounters and enforces changes. And when the government might not bring this change for the people, for the government, for in custody, maybe they will bring this change for the good of the police officers who do not need to be investigating each other. So this is where I've been talking, or we have been talking. I've seen this, the motion here, or the process that we are talking about here. It is something that I would rather want to see it done the way we did the BID.
Point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Sorry.
Under Standing Order 43, I request an extension of time for the member for Mulca.
Is leave granted?
Yeah.
Oh, leave is granted.
Thank you. Is something that we had everyone from the party, from the government, the independent and the opposition all supported this and work towards solving issues. And it's funny, when I stand here and then people putting motions up, there's always people saying support or people not supporting. And I don't really understand what we need to do here. How can we work together to stand and support? If we only work together, listen to one another, things will get better. Things should get better. And including, I represent the indigenous people, not just my own, but the countrymen around the place. And I know more than any of the non-indigenous government departments sort of know, and we've always stood, and I have stood when there's fighting going on in the communities, spears were being thrown, weapons were being carried on, and the police were walking, and I said, I'll stand in front of you, and I will go over and talk to the people. And the people have listened to me, and it had worked for the last 8-9 years in communities. There were people that were families fighting, and the guy wanted to throw a weapon, some kind of bar, to the police car. But I called him up and I said, no, don't do that. I am Yingiya, your family member. Don't do that. It'll only make it worse for you. So just back up and go away. And at least when the police goes home to the station, you can go and see them and tell them that you're sorry. And he said, yes, I will do that. So we walked up and said sorry, and everything was solved. This is where the support from our elders, I've been calling on this for a long, long time. Elders need to be part of this. It is the policing that we look after as well. We'll do policing and running the governance in the 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 system, but we are never recognized. If we work together, we will create a pathway really clear, different to, rather than just one side party or someone else from somewhere. But don't forget, our Indigenous people are incarcerated higher in the rates because something is wrong, something is not working well. Unless you people work with us, the Indigenous leaders in the communities, we will start to see solving. I know, I believe, and I know, and I've done that, and the police have walked with me, and they said to me, thank you for being beside us. There were a guy with a gun in 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 who ran off into the bush, and the police tried to look around, search around for him, and couldn't find him for a couple of days, and all of a sudden, what they did was, they started to bring the task force in to come and find him, chase him around. And I said, when I saw them, and I said, I know where he is. I know which family I can go and approach. We will bring him back. And they let me, stood and waited for me. I went to get the family there, and we went over and called him, and he walked out, and we went and handed him to the police. That's if we can work together without any killings, crimes, and happening. This is what I believe. This is my understanding what this motion is about. Is it a motion? What's it called? Motion, yeah. I am supporting this because this is what I would like to see. It's the federally, who can come and work to us from, they're not just from one party, but differently that can work, and hopefully they will want to include Indigenous leaders so that we work together. And the governments and oppositions should be able to stand together and work together and solve. None of this stuff saying, no, we got it. We know what is best for these people. And I have seen for the last 3 terms that there has been failures. And right now I am speaking to urge the government to listen to one another. It's not your, I don't know, maybe the Westminster system doesn't work this way, but in 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 law, we work together so that we solve issues together. And here, I brought a message here into the chamber so that the government listen and we can solve issues, and we will solve issues for the community, for our Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, that we all live together in this safe community. When the family of 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 White called for an independent investigation, the police said that this could not be done. This is family calling. This is family calling. This is elders calling, leaders calling. They wanted to solve this issue. They said they were told by the outsiders the powers of investigation under entry law. Could it happen? So let's take this opportunity now and create a new pathway for national body, and that can probably include people from here in Dheran. To investigate and call jurisdictions. So that justice can be properly done. And that's the only way, well, that's why I am asking stand with this, because nothing has worked for my understanding when I represented my people, started from my own electorate, and now people are calling from different electorates in the territory, Indigenous people, for me to stand and support and represent those people to try and send a word out here. But I've always been told, no, she'll be right. We know what we got working on this, or how we can fix this, and it never happened unless you and I, we walk out to the communities out there, talk to the families, and solve issues and try and work things and make a better turn around a better future. Turn around a better future. We know the jails are full. It's recorded high, very, very high right now. Something is wrong. Please listen. Please listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Mulka. Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I will rise tonight to speak to the member for Johnston's bill. I'll first like to just acknowledge the member for Fanny Bay's husband, who is also a police officer, and I know is a man of great integrity, and a man I would sincerely trust with executing the laws of this House, both factually and upholding the duty that he's been given. I'd also like to acknowledge member for Barclay's career, the Treasurer's career as well, and the Deputy Chief's father as we go through this. First, Deputy Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the families and their grief for any death in custody. I know particularly at the moment there are families grieving here in the Northern Territory. There are communities grieving, and on behalf of our government, and I think just the human side of every Territorian, a death is a tragedy. The death of young people are tragedies. And so we acknowledge the grief those families and communities are going through. What I will do, though, I will be speaking against the bill, and I will aim to outline, using the policies, the bills that are currently in place, as to why I will be opposing it, and why I think we actually have quite a strong justice system in the legislation, and so that's how I'll aim to speak to this bill. And so, outlining what we currently have in place, I hope to logically put forward basically the commitment to justice, transparency and accountability. This is a topic that is very emotional, and so what I'm aiming to do, which I think is the ultimate responsibility when we govern, it's very easy to be caught in the emotional side of these topics, where I think we need to step back and logically look at how best we can govern for the people of the Northern Territory. I really want to emphasise the importance of the coronial process. I truly believe it's a legally sound. There's been a continuous push since self-government to increase the cultural sensitivities of that office as well, and to ensure that it's publicly trusted. And that last word, public trust, is so critical. And I'll oppose it as well because even if it's not the intention, I believe we are, and there's a theme that has come through to erode the public trust in a number of positions. And this bill to pass would erode public trust in both our anti-police and our internal justice system. And I'll come back to what I think on a self-government and a decentralisation of power, especially when it comes to federal. And I'll come back to that at the end, but why I think we are best placed to get to the points the member for Mulca spoke of, why I don't believe a federal structure would be best to get there. So the coronial framework in the Northern Territory context, so we're governed by the Coroners Act 1993 in the NT, which mandates independent investigations for all deaths in custody. So when a death in custody occurs, the coroner is mandated to conduct an investigation. The NT coroner is a judicial officer, and this is a really important part, is independent. It is an independent of government, it is independent of police. And we have that structure at the moment. So we have the independent coroner. The NT Police act as the lead investigative agency under the coroner's direction and on behalf of the coroner. The coroner retains full authority over the scope, conduct, and outcomes of each investigation. So government nor police can influence the scope, conduct, and outcomes of each investigation. As we come here, I would like to focus now on the police side of that. I and our government has full confidence in the NT Police. I want to make that extremely clear. I believe they are perfectly placed, and I have full confidence in their ability to conduct investigations with integrity and impartiality. Officers are trained in forensic procedures, trauma-informed interviewing, and investigative best practices. And when it comes to my own electorate in Drysdale, when these things are going on, I want local police officers. I want my local constables. I want my local Aboriginal liaison officers. I want local interpreters, because they're trusted and known within the community. Palmerston, I believe Palmerston's a great big place, but we are a small, tight-knit community. We know the police officers, and we know their faces, and I believe there is an incredible amount of work going in from our NT Police to ensure that all people feel that they can trust the conduct of NT Police, and we've got some great initiatives going on at NT Police to grow our numbers, especially of Territorian Aboriginal police officers, which I think is fantastic. But the fact is, I want local Territorians policing in Drysdale, investigating in Drysdale, even for things like a death in custody. I want that local knowledge, that nuance that is the Territory to be here. I do not want anyone from Canberra or another state to come into my electorate and conduct those investigations. It was brought up, the member for Johnson's bill discredits police. I think even if that's not the intention, the bill does, and police officers will feel that. So I believe it undermines them, as these officers across the Northern Territory are trained and they have this duty which they take very seriously, and a lot do take it that they are a slave to the facts and to their duty of justice. Now, like all human beings, that won't always be perfect, and that's why we have more of that's why we have the coroner's office and a few other, which I'll now go into, the ombudsman, to cover when those issues arise. But so as I was saying, I want local police. Investigations, I believe, can be covered by NT Police without fear or favour with respect to the rule of law. And NT police are expected to demonstrate cultural awareness and engage respectfully with Aboriginal families and communities. And protocols ensure investigations are both procedurally sound and culturally sensitive. I do think our police officers are best placed to deal with the issues and events that happen in the Northern Territory because they are trained here in the Territory. And I will stand firm on that fact. And I think the best way to actually overcome this problem is to recruit more within our Territory, more from communities from all over the Northern Territory. Further on independent oversight, so we have the NT Coroner, we have the DPP and the NT Ombudsman. These three different bodies all maintain their independence. The NT Coroner provides judicial independence and transparency in determining cause and circumstance of death. The NT Ombudsman, under the Ombudsman Act 2001 NT, has the authority to investigate complaints about police conduct and systemic issues. So if there is misconduct, which I'm not at all saying it doesn't happen, if there is misconduct, we have in place in the Northern Territory the Ombudsman Office to oversee that. If there's systemic issues which have been raised, the NT Ombudsman is there as an independent body to investigate. The Ombudsman can initiate own initiative investigations into the conduct of police. This all reinforces public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the process, and any findings of possible criminality will be referred to the DPP for review and recommendation of charges relating to the death, with a final report, and any recommendation from the coroner must be provided to the Attorney-General on completion without delay. So I've just outlined, I believe we have a very thorough system here in the NT that's very independent, and it's not just one, it's layered. So we have layers for people to hear grievances and to ensure that police are policed. I'll go back to some events in the past as well, which I think speak to this issue and some of the learnings we can take. In the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, it made 339 recommendations, and many have been adopted in NT practice since that period. And some of these include mandatory reporting and the large body of work which is very much ongoing into culturally appropriate engagement. And that will be that's a continuous journey. For myself, that's something I've been trying to learn my whole life here in the Territory, and it's something I continually try to get better at as well. And it's something our police are always striving to do. We're obviously always continuing to refine the coronial process in light of these recommendations, and the 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 inquest demonstrates the seriousness to which these matters are treated. We're also looking at a review, it's been flagged for a review of the Coroner's Act to ensure the sustainability and maintain the rigorous standards of the office. And so the fact is we can always get better internally without having to go to the federal government. I think it's worthy to do a national comparison as well. So all Australian jurisdictions require coronial investigations into deaths in custody. NT's dual coroner and ombudsman oversight modelling is among the strongest nationally. The NT exceeds minimum national standards in public inquests, published findings and ombudsman review. It aligns with the international best practices and UN guidelines on transparency and cultural competence, which I have listed a few, but feel free to go and read them. So the coronial system is benchmarked against other jurisdictions for continuous improvement as well. What I'm getting at is nationally, I think we're doing very well when you compare us to other states. I'll speak about cultural sensitivity and community engagement. The NT's Coroner's Office provides culturally appropriate support for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families and MT Police have the expertise and access to interpreters to consult community leaders when appropriate. And we have made it very clear we want to grow that capability. And that's the word I've just used, capability. That is what the government believes it is. We are becoming a more capable police force by growing our Aboriginal force that serves within NT Police. And may I add, across the entire judiciary, including, be it in the Commissioner's Office, the NT Ombudsman Office, it will improve capability. The Ombudsman's role in police involved deaths. So the Ombudsman is notified and reviews how NT Police conduct investigations into deaths in custody, especially when police investigate their own officers. The office has the authority to conduct own motion investigations should they see fit, examines thoroughness, impartiality, and cultural sensitivity of investigations, provides an independent channel for families and communities to raise concerns, and in high-profile cases, Ombudsman involvement has addressed community concerns and ensured transparency, essential in addressing perceptions of police investigating police and reinforcing public trust. Once again, we see this layered combination we have already in the legislative framework that ensures the public trust in the position. The coronial recommendations, coming to reform, the coronial recommendations lead to changes in police procedures, corrections policy and health protocols. That's an automatic process that comes down from the coroner. The anti-government supports ongoing training in cultural competency and investigative integrity. It's committed to reducing deaths in custody through prevention and systemic reform, and coronial process promotes accountability, learning and prevention of future tragedies. I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have a very thorough system here in the Northern Territory. It is very easy to get caught in the emotional grief, which is absolutely human when these events happen. However, our job is to govern, and we need to step back and genuinely ask, is bringing Canberra in the best option for Territorians? I adamantly believe it will never be on anything. I am strong in my belief that we need greater independence. I am a firm believer in the eventual statehood of this jurisdiction, and I do not want Canberra coming in to meddle with the Northern Territory. I will need to refute a few things. We have a case before us with the unfortunate death with Mr. White's passing. As we've already spoken in this chamber, and this is to Member for Daly, who holds quite a high office here in the Northern Territory as Deputy Leader of the Opposition. I genuinely believe we shouldn't be leaning into cases that are currently under investigation and currently involved in the judicial, and I would sincerely ask that the opposition ensures that we have a fair judiciary process as we go through. The fact is, we do not know the facts. We all would have some hearsay of what's happened. I've spoken to an alleged victim, but I will not state here any of that because it's up to the judiciary, it is not up to this House. So I think it is wise for us all to refrain. I would also ask, and I know this won't stop, but motherhood statements on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I believe, is very disingenuous as well. In my electorate, the views of all people are incredibly broad. The views of Aboriginal people in my electorate are incredibly broad when it comes to these matters of how the judiciary should act, how law and order should be conducted, and it covers the entire spectrum, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So I know it won't stop, but for the record, I believe it's a very disingenuous to make motherhood statements based on any racial group or other simple identifier. So the NT government and I stand firmly behind the coronial process. I have full confidence in NT Police to conduct investigations with integrity and cultural sensitivity. The NT Coroner and Ombudsman provide robust and independent oversight. They're committed to justice, truth and dignity for every life lost in custody, and call to uphold these standards and build a safer, more respectful Northern Territory. And to all the NT Police, know that I and this government fully back you. You are to be the right hand of the law, and we support you the entire way. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I stand to speak in support of the motion from the member for Johnson, calling for federal oversight into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in custody. Since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, over 600 First Nations people have died in custody across this country, including at least 23 this year alone. These aren't statistics, they're grandparents, children, parents, lives cut short by failures in duty of care. One of those 600 lives was �𝙬𝙈𝙆𝙀, a young Warlpiri man who died in police custody in May this year. The last time we gathered in this chamber, his grandfather, Ned 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙀 Price, sat in the gallery observing the Parliament. Mr Hargraves and his family, his community and their supporters have been calling for an independent investigation into his grandson's death, but those calls have fallen on deaf ears. I'm grateful for the member for Johnson for putting this matter back on the agenda, and to Mr Hargraves and his family for their tireless advocacy, their bravery and resilience. And also in response to some of the concerns around motherhood statements, I also agree that we can't paint First Nations communities as one monolith, and when I refer to Aboriginal people here, it's to specific groups, families, organisations that have come out and said things. The member for Johnson has detailed why it's essential that we have independent oversight, but I think it's worth restating and highlighting the following. So first and foremost, many in our community, particularly many First Nations people in my community and others, now I'm going to get onto this word trust actually that has caused such an issue in the chamber here today. But before I start that, I do want to reiterate some of the things that have been said. The behaviour from the Deputy Chief Minister, once again in this place, the overt aggression, threats and bullying is just so unbecoming of a person in this position, and we're all just fed up with it. I just wish for once that he could act like a grown-up in this place. So when I say trust, this comes from constituents, people who have explicitly said we have lost trust or we distrust. And look, institutions investigating themselves usually, generally, breeds mistrust. So with that being said, there are many in our community who do not trust the Northern Territory Police to objectively investigate their own conduct. Now, this is not unreasonable. Independent oversight is a cornerstone of transparent, accountable government and must also be applied to the NT Police. The NT government claims internal investigations are sufficient and that independence might compromise further actions, but this is demonstrably false. Every other Australian jurisdiction uses independent commissions without this problem. What independence does is provide community confidence in the integrity of investigations, something we desperately need here. There is widespread support in the community, in my community, particularly in the legal community and amongst First Nations organisations for independent oversight. In July this year, the family of 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙀, alongside over 20 First Nations organisations, including the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Legal Service, NATSLS, and the Central Australian Women's Legal Service, signed a letter calling on the Territory Government to establish a police ombudsman in the NT so there can be independent investigations of police misconduct and deaths in custody. In the letter they said, the coroner, quote, formally found what Aboriginal people in the NT have always known, that no one is holding the NT police accountable when they use excessive force and hurt Aboriginal people, and there is entrenched systemic and structural racism within the NT police, end quote. Also in July, the Central Land Council called on the federal government to withhold funding from this government until it establishes an independent police conduct commission into the deaths of 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎. Warren Williams, the CLC chair, said, quote, "We don't trust this government and its police force to keep us safe," end quote. I want to unpack what Mr Williams is saying. Mr Williams was highlighting that the NT government gets an enormous amount of funding from the Commonwealth government for closing the gap, to improve the lives and well-being of First Nations Territorians. He wants the federal government to stop giving money to the CLP until they establish an independent police conduct commission, because he said, and I quote, "Our lives are worth less than a chocolate bar to those in power, and money is the only language they understand," end quote. Mr Williams can see what many in the community see, and that this CLP government does not take in closing the gap seriously. The Attorney-General said that closing the gap, quote, "cannot come at the expense of community safety." And I think this sums up the CLP's attitude perfectly. We can only close the gap in the NT as long as it's not inconvenient for non-Indigenous Territorians, that it's okay to enable neglect and excessive force that leads to deaths in custody in the first place, all in the name for so-called safety for non-Indigenous population. These unbelievable comments paint First Nations people as a risk to the non-Indigenous community and fuel the very racism and violence that results in deaths in custody. Mr Deputy Speaker, this brings me to my second point. We know that there is institutional racism within the Northern Territory Police. That was a central finding of Coroner Armitage's report into the death of 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎, released earlier this year. Time and time again, we've seen instances where Aboriginal people in police custody are subjected to neglect and violence that their non-Indigenous counterparts are not subjected to. And too often that neglect and violence results in injury or death. Coroner Armitage was clear in her inquest report that NT Police bears the hallmarks of institutional racism. She said that Zachary Rolfe, who shot and killed 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎, she said, quote, was racist and worked in and benefited from an organisation with the hallmarks of institutional racism. How can the community be expected to trust an institution that bears the hallmarks of institutional racism to investigate deaths that result from that racism? It's just not good enough. Thirdly, the conditions that people in prison are currently being held in are enormously dangerous and putting their lives at risk. People are being held in overcrowded prisons and watch houses without air conditioning, privacy, dignity or proper sanitation. It's a ticking time bomb in there. The NT Police Association itself in a statement said that conditions in prison are, quote, out of control, and said that, quote, it's not a matter of if but when a serious custody incident occurs, end quote. When the Police Association is sounding the alarm, we must act, yet this government continues down a path that is making tragedy inevitable. This crisis in our prisons and watch houses is a direct result of the CLP's harmful tough-on-crime agenda, their addiction to incarceration and their failure to address the causes of crime. It speaks to the very issue that Mr Williams raised earlier. The CLP government does not value the lives of First Nations people in the NT. We need to be taking serious steps to prevent deaths in custody. When they do occur, we need well-resourced independent oversight to understand the cause of death. We need to listen to the demands of the families of those who have had lives taken to help them get justice. And we need to listen to the recommendations of experts like Commissioner Armitage to make systemic changes to our justice system to protect human life and dignity. Mr Deputy Speaker, 34 years after the Royal Commission, we are still counting bodies, still hearing families beg for basic accountability, and still watching governments ignore expert recommendations. This motion is not radical, it's the bare minimum: independent oversight, transparency, accountability. These are not threats to justice, they are its foundations. The Commonwealth must step in where this government has failed. Our families deserve answers. Our community deserves safety, and every life lost in custody deserves a truly independent investigation. I strongly support this motion and urge all members to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Nightcliff. Member for Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to basically speak in opposition to this particular motion. And I do want to begin today by sincerely acknowledging the tragedies which touch families and communities deeply. and they call on all of us across government and society to act with the utmost seriousness and respect. The motion before us calls on the Commonwealth Government to urgently set up a national independent body and to have the power to investigate deaths in custody involving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I do understand where this call comes from, Mr Deputy Speaker. It appears to come from a genuine concern from families and communities who want answers, and from a shared hope that we can prevent future deaths. And I think that is a goal that we all want to achieve. But as the Attorney-General for the Northern Territory, I have to say that creating a national independent body is not the right solution for our Northern Territory. It's not about ignoring the problem. It's about recognising that the Northern Territory has unique circumstances and it does need a local approach. Mr Deputy Speaker, just before I go on, I want to correct the record for the Deputy Chief Minister, who was mentioning the number of deaths in custody, and he talked about the number being 38 deaths in custody over the past 5 years. We've just had it confirmed, and he would like me to correct that it was actually 38 deaths in custody since July 2011, which is 14 years, not 5 years. So just as a clarification as he was going through his speech. Mr Deputy Speaker, our Chief Minister, 𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎, has been clear, and I completely agree that investigations into the deaths in custody must be handled by people who understand our local laws, our communities, and the challenges we face here. The Northern Territory is very different from other parts of Australia. Our Indigenous communities have their own cultures and connections. Our police and justice systems operate in a unique environment. A national body without deep knowledge of this local context could make things worse instead of better. Right now, investigations are led by our Northern Territory Police with oversight by the coroner. The role of the coroner in the Northern Territory is to independently investigate certain types of deaths and whether any preventative recommendations can be made. The coronial process is focused on fact-finding rather than assigning blame. Mr Deputy Speaker, when a death in custody occurs, the coroner must hold a public inquest. At the end of the inquest, the coroner delivers formal findings and may make recommendations aimed at preventing similar deaths in future to government. In addition to this robust coronial process, independent bodies like the NT Ombudsman and the Independent Commission Against Corruption provide important checks and balances. These systems are designed to make sure investigations are fair, are transparent and are thorough. And to say that only a national body can do this work is to overlook the important and often difficult work done every day by our local investigators, the coroner, the oversight agencies. And these professionals are committed to justice and accountability, and they know our communities well. Starting a new national body would not be easy. It would take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of effort to set up. And without the strong understanding of territory laws and communities, it risks delaying justice and frustrating families who need answers quickly, especially in their time of grief. We also need to remember that one size does not fit all. The issues faced by Indigenous people in the Northern Territory are different from those in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane. And even in our remote communities, they're all very different. And we know that as we go around the communities and meeting Territorians and speaking to Territorians. Our legal arrangements and our cultural diversity require solutions which are tailored to us, to the Northern Territory. I also want to acknowledge the calls for more transparency, such as things like quicker release of CCTV footage or clearer communication with families. These are reasonable requests, but we actually need to find the right balance, Mr Deputy Speaker, between openness and protecting the integrity of investigations. We have seen here that local authorities can conduct thorough investigations, they can hold people to account, and they can bring about real change. What families and communities want is justice that is not only fair, but timely and culturally respectful. And a national body disconnected from the territory's unique realities risks making justice slower and less meaningful. And we must be careful not to lose sight of the importance of local knowledge and connection. My focus as Attorney-General will remain on strengthening our existing Northern Territory systems and ensuring they have the independence, expertise, community trust that is necessary to do this important work. And I think we can all agree in this chamber that we owe it to the families of those who have lost a loved one in these circumstances, and of course to Territorians more broadly, to build a system that works for Territorians, that works for Territorian families, a system that's grounded in that respect and that local knowledge, but also accountability. And quite frankly, the federal government and a national body just does not have that tailored system that can do that. It's a lot more red tape, a lot more resources, and takes a lot more time. We as the Northern Territory Government is committed to a task that is, of course, improving those systems. The coroner's reports come across my desk regularly. They then go out to all the departments, and the departments work on the things that the coroner suggests of what needs to be improved. It's a very thorough process, and it happens for all of the coroner reports that the coroner presents. And we will continue to do that because we do want to prevent deaths. We do want to prevent deaths in custody, and we want to support families through that incredibly difficult process. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Attorney-General. Any further speakers? I'll call on the member for Johnson for closing debate. Oh, sorry. Member for Wangara, you? No. Member for Johnson for closing debate.
Thank you, Mr Changing Over Deputy Speaker, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank all members who've contributed to this debate today, though I must say I'm deeply disappointed but perhaps not surprised that the CLP are not supporting this motion. Let me be clear what we are asking for here. This motion does not call on this Parliament to establish a new body. It does not require us to allocate funding. It does not ask us to implement complex reforms or navigate constitutional questions. It simply asks this Assembly to add our voices to a call that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and I agree with the member for Drysdale that we cannot lump everyone into one generic group, but communities, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities speaking for themselves across Australia, families, legal services, the 4 Northern Territory land councils and the entire Australian human rights community have been making clear for years and requesting for years that the Commonwealth establish an independent national body to investigate deaths in custody. That's it. I'm just asking members here to use their voice to stand with grieving families, to support accountability and transparency, something that we could all do, a simple thing together. This motion is not a radical ask. There's nothing partisan about calling for independent oversight when someone dies in state custody. There's nothing controversial about saying that police should not investigate police, or that families deserve answers, or that after 609 deaths, I stand corrected, I said 602 earlier, and 30 years of inaction, it's time for the Commonwealth to act. Now, some members of this chamber have suggested that calling for independent investigations somehow means that we do not trust police. Madam Speaker, that is a complete mischaracterisation. Asking for independent oversight is not about mistrust, it's about appropriateness and the principles of justice. Let me give you an example. When a serious workplace incident occurs at a work site, we don't ask the construction company to investigate itself. We have WorkSafe NT conduct an independent investigation. That doesn't mean that we don't trust the construction companies. It means we recognise that no organisation should investigate itself when serious harm has occurred under its watch. It's a matter of basic conflict of interest, transparency and public confidence and safety. The same principle applies here. When someone dies in police custody or during a police operation, asking police to investigate police creates an inherent conflict of interest. It denies family independent answers and it fails to meet international human rights standards that Australia has committed to uphold. I thank the member for Drysdale and the Attorney-General for outlining clearly their conviction into the current existing processes. But the issue remains. We have 6 times as many Aboriginal people dying in the care of the state compared to non-Aboriginal people, and what we are doing is not stopping it, not here and not across Australia. Madam Speaker, let me be very clear. This is not about blaming police. This is about addressing systemic failures. This is about trying to stop deaths that should not be happening. And in fact, Madam Speaker, robust independent processes are good for police as well. They protect officers from accusations of cover-ups. They provide public confidence in findings. They remove the impossible burden of investigating their own colleagues in traumatic circumstances. Independent oversight strengthens the integrity of our justice system and supports the vast majority of police who do their jobs professionally and with care, and I join with other members in this chamber in acknowledging that. So this should be the easiest thing in the world for every member of this parliament to support. But instead we've heard from the CLP that they will not support this. They would rather the Northern Territory, the jurisdiction with the highest proportion of Aboriginal Australians, the highest proportion of Indigenous people locked up in the entire world, the place that knows this crisis most intimately, to say nothing. What message does this send to the families of 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙋𝙎 and 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙾? What does it say to the Aboriginal communities across this territory who've been calling for reform for decades? What does it tell the Australian Human Rights Commission when even a simple motion of support is too much for this government? Madam Speaker, this is not about politics, this is about people. This is about the 609 Indigenous Australians who've died in custody since 1991. This is about 12 more deaths just this year. This is about children. 95% of children in the Northern Territory are Aboriginal, locked up at rates that should shame us all. And this is about saying that when the state takes someone into custody, exercises all its powers over them, and that person dies, there must be independent accountability. Madam Speaker, if the CLP opposes this motion today, history will not look kindly on this decision. When people look back at this moment, they will ask, where did the Northern Territory stand? Did we take the opportunity to lead, or did we look away? The families who have lost loved ones in custody have been calling for this for years. They are asking for what every Australian should expect, that when someone dies, one of their family members dies in the care of the state, there is an independent, properly resourced investigation that can deliver truth and accountability and change. And that's all I'm asking this parliament to do today, to support that call. Add our voice and show leadership. This should not be difficult and this should not be controversial. 609 deaths is 609 too many. 30 years of inaction is long enough. To the CLP members, I've heard those of you who chose to speak today, and what I say to you now is that it's not too late. You can still choose to stand on the right side of history. You can still choose to support accountability and justice. You can still choose to use your voice for this thing that matters so deeply to so many people in our territory. But if you won't, then let the record show that when this parliament had the chance to call for independent oversight of deaths in custody, when we had the opportunity to show leadership to the rest of Australia on an issue that affects Aboriginal people across this nation, the CLP said no. Madam Speaker, I believe that Territorians deserve better than that, Aboriginal families deserve better than that, and our democracy deserves better than that. To those members who will support this motion, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to speak up, for standing with families and communities, and for recognising that justice and accountability are not partisan issues, that they are human rights. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Aye. I think the noes have it. Division? A division is called. Please ring the bells. Sorry? Sorry. Yes, it's supported. The division is 6 ayes and 16 noes. The noes have it. The motion has not been passed.